ease the way for these job creators. So that it was one piece of progress, but there is so much more that we can do, that we need to do. We did pass a budget through the House of Representatives. We did it in 2011, we did it in 2012. The Senate has not passed a budget in more than 3 years. I don't know that any of you here could run the enterprises that you do or the governmental bodies that you do, the civic organizations, without a budget. I mean, that's just, again, common sense. This is what you do in your own life. The federal government really should do the same thing. And the federal budget is a behemoth. It is a mess. They use single entry accounting, if I'm not mistaken, and that means that they have not even begun realistically to account for the tremendous obligations that we face going forward as more and more baby boomers come to rely on the benefits that they've paid into throughout their working lives in Social Security and Medicare. The House budget does account for those things, which is why it takes rather a long time, to say the least, to go fully into balance. It actually takes until about 2037, 25 years from now, to balance, and that's because we do know that we have commitments in Social Security and Medicare that we will honor, and those are important commitments. But because we have such, it's estimated there's about $70 trillion worth of future obligations coming in Social Security and Medicare. We have to have an economy that will allow us to honor those obligations and still allow for caring for those most in need, the safety net that folks outside even of Social Security and Medicare rely on, care for our defense, protect our environment, allow for infrastructure maintenance, the things that we rely on the federal government to do. So we have to have economic growth to accommodate all those needs. Tax relief, regulatory reform, making sure that the federal government behaves as a good servant to you, but does not endeavor to dominate your life. Those are the broad goals that I share with the members of my conference, and with many Democratic colleagues as well. So these are the themes we've been working along. Because the federal government has such a complicated portfolio of obligations, and of course in Goshen we have some of our black dirt. I worry about our small farmers, our family farms, so that's also a piece of the portfolio that we're talking about right now. We just passed a transportation bill, the farm bill is still pending. These affect people's lives very directly. They're big and complicated and costly things to work on. And since we've agreed, and House and Senate did agree not to seek earmarks, which do make legislation much easier to pass in many respects, there has been a lot of back and forth and a lot of struggle trying to get these massive bills taken care of, and to keep the business of the business, so to speak. The federal government does not run as a business. If it did, we'd be better off. But to keep the federal government going for you, so that we have a smooth transition into a better, more productive economic future. I'm running again, obviously, for election this year. The House is every 2 years. And the tenets, the fundamentals haven't changed. We need to provide relief from the burdens that are keeping our enterprise base down. It's not hard to figure out what we could do if we had agreement with the Senate and with the President. I think it's anybody's guess as to how the climate's going to look after November 6th. But certainly I intend to continue working with the idea firmly in mind, with the fundamental principle firmly in mind, that we respect the individual citizen and that every citizen deserves to have the best opportunities and the best that this country can offer them. And that's the way I always seek to go about the task that I'm performing for you. There are lots more specifics we can talk about. Healthcare, of course, Dodd-Frank, anything that is foremost in your mind, Medicare. I'm going to ask you, if you would, I'm going to ask you to open up the floor, and I will be happy to take your questions or hear your thoughts, if that's okay, Lynn. Can we do that? So please, ask away. Please.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Wilson, Willy Gilly Productions. We're a local film and television production company. And the Jobs Act...
Okay, we met David,
yes,
at the Warwick Winery.
Yep, we have.
Yeah, Warwick Winery.
Yeah, the Jobs Act that you talked about was really a compromise measure, kind of a stopgap that was agreed to by Congress in order to be able to, forestall some disastrous result. But many of the stipulations and incentives that were included in the previous Jobs Act were omitted, one of them being a film and television credit, the Rule 181 credit, which provides incentives for producers of independent films up to $20 million, which is about 2,000 jobs for one production, a $20 million production. And we see this area as being critical for independent film growth and development here in Orange County, and that's very damaging for any effort to bring in financing and investment if those deductions are not available to those who would invest in film and television. Right. What do you propose about doing with some of these different things? Is there any intention on your part to promote additional jobs incentives going forward this year?
Well, absolutely. The biggest jobs incentive that we can provide would be certainly to try to relieve as much of the tax burden on our small businesses and our entrepreneurs as possible. There's a large package of so-called extenders that will be voted on. David, I think what that section that you're referring to will probably be in that package of extenders. So long as we don't have the broad consensus in the Congress to really dramatically reform the tax code, we are going to try to keep as many relief provisions going as possible for as many segments of industry as possible. In fact, I've introduced a Commuter Savings Act myself to provide for parity between the tax credits for those who drive and park and can claim, I think at this point, $240 tax credit per month versus taking mass transit. Mass transit commuters right now can only get a tax credit, I think it's $120, maybe $130 a month, and I'd like to equalize those. So in one sense, that does add yet another provision to the tax code, but in another, it just seems fair in this climate to try to provide that relief. So I assure you, we're not seeking to increase anybody's taxes at this point. So I would imagine that will be included in an extenders package that we will try to get moving, certainly try to get through the House before the end of the year.
Is there some way we can find out whether or not that's included in that package?
Yes, if you can jot down, Dave, that specific, I'll make sure that our team checks on that.
Okay, great,
gets back
thanks.
to you. But to my knowledge, we're planning on trying to extend every one of those provisions until we get the broad reform that we need. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Nan Wilson, and I'm also a
I like your name.
production. Is your Nan a given?
Yes, it's just Nan.
Me too. Okay.
Wow, that's it. Yeah. Not Nancy, not yet.
I wanted to always ask you that.
Well, Nan, I'm glad to meet another Nan. It's an odd name.
Okay, that's settled.
Well, I was named for someone whose name was Hannah, my mother's mother, and she
Okay,
died
well,
long before I was born.
My mother was Dutch, and I was supposed to be Jan.
Oh.
But and then when I was born, they had to come up with something.
I was gonna be George Franklin's son of the third. So,
Hold on now.
So at any rate, what I just wanted to say is that, and I know that the federal government is not run as a business, but I really just want to say from a businesswoman's standpoint that not extending the tax credits, the 181C, in a timely manner. I mean, you can just see if you run along doing business and you're waiting for a fuel delivery.
absolutely.
And it's not going to come because it's not going to be voted on.
Right.
I mean, it's very hard to have a continuation of the